Everybody. The next topic that we're going to discuss is how the Cold War affected us here in the United States. So let's get this thing started. Our learning outcomes, you should be able to understand how the movie industry was affected by fears of communism. Secondly, describe the impact that espionage had on the development of the Cold War. Third, analyze the rise and fall of Joseph McCarthy. And lastly, evaluate Eisenhower's policy of brinkmanship and how it enhanced Cold War tensions. So, first of all, us at home. There are a couple policies that are going to be created post-World War II, one of them being the Loyalty Review Board. This Loyalty Review Board was supposed to investigate government employees and get rid of those that were deemed disloyal to the United States. 3.2 million people were investigated, only 212 were dismissed. And we really don't know exactly why they were dismissed. They could have had possible ties or thought to have possible ties. The most interesting part about this is that another 2,900 employees resigned because they felt that it was against their constitutional right. We also have the HUAC, the House Un-American Activities Committee. This is specifically going to investigate the movie industry. The target was communist propaganda in movies or films. We have a very short-sighted or short memory when it comes to what happened in the past. People choose not to remember that us and the Soviets were allies during World War II. So of course we're going to make pro-Soviet films in World War II and anti-Nazi, anti-Hitler propaganda films. Well, now the HUAC is going to investigate those people that were involved in communist films and claim that they are communists and have communist ties. One specific group of people, the Hollywood 10, they believe that the hearings were unconstitutional and they were sent to prison for not participating in them. Ultimately, the Hollywood 10 and about close to 500 more were blacklisted because of their quote-unquote ties to communism and communist backgrounds. So, moving forward, here's a picture of what a protest of Hollywood 10 looked like. You can see going to jail, free the Hollywood 10, free the Hollywood 10, demand presidential pardon, and here's another picture of the Hollywood 10 with their lawyers. So espionage or spying. Alger Hiss is one guy that was accused of spying. He was an employee of the State Department. Richard Nixon is going to be the one that is going to be in pursuit of Alger Hiss in 1948, and he is going to be made famous because of it and later become vice president and then later a presidential candidate and then 1968 actually president. It is confirmed with the fall of the Soviet Union, Soviet cables being made public, that he was very much tied to the Soviet Union, that those cables were typed on his typewriter. The Rosenbergs, Ethel and Julius, they were minor activists in the American Communist Party. Now, this isn't really a big deal. A lot of people in the 20s, 30s, and 40s, when they registered to vote, just were like, oh, Communist Party, whatever, let's just put it down. Very much like today, it's not just Republican, Democrat, Independent. That would make it way too easy. There's Green Party, there's Freedom Party, there's Constitutional Party, on down the line. There's so many. And which one do you pick? If you really don't know anything about it, you just punch one through. They are accused of giving atomic bomb secrets to the Soviet Union. They are claiming that they are being victimized for being Jewish, that their Communist Party ties was not a big deal. They are convicted of espionage. The judge in the case says that what they did was worse than murder, and that they are the reasons why we now have a nuclear arms race between us and the Soviet Union. 1953, they are executed with the electric chair. It is confirmed later that Ethel was really more just an accessory, and that Julius was the one that was actually the courier for the Soviet Union. Now, Senator Joseph McCarthy from Wisconsin, he is going to be the most famous anti-communist, way more so than Attorney General A. Mitchell Palmer in the early 1920s. He has a meteoric rise in the early 1950s because of his play on the fears of communism coming out of the Korean War. He began to exploit those fears of communism and make the claims that communists are taking over our government, and that the Democrats, who have been in office since 1932, are in fact soft on communism and have allowed this to happen. So McCarthyism itself, what that basically means is unsupported accusations of communism, and he is going to make these accusations in the actual State Department. These accusations of disloyalty pretty much have no evidence. He is not going to name any names out in public. He's only going to name names on the Senate floor where he has legal immunity. He makes a statement that he has a list of 205 names of men known to be communists working for the State Department, and again, tying it back to the Democrats and them being soft on communism. It started out as a list of 50, then it keeps growing all the way to 205. Republicans want to use this to win the 1952 election. They know that the American people are tired of the Democrats. They're tired of roughly 20 years of Democratic rule. So take a look at this political cartoon right here. This is Senator Joseph McCarthy basically painting himself into a corner with these accusations of communism. If you can't really see it there, but if the cartoon was in color, it would be red, and red symbolizing communism. So McCarthy's downfall, he's going to argue that there's a communist conspiracy in the government and that it is our duty to take it down. The problem is he never comes out with any evidence. It's repeated false allegation after false allegation after false allegation, and ultimately he's going to lose a considerable amount of support. Where McCarthy is really going to take a wrong turn is when he makes accusations against the army and that they are soft on communism abroad. This is going to lead to a public hearing which an estimated 20 million people are going to watch on TV. Now, this is in the early ages of television. 20 million people watching this is an astounding number of people. They're going to see McCarthy using his bullying tactics, his very brash personality, and basically making these accusations and coming off very harsh. And it's really going to turn people off to McCarthy and his witch hunt, if you want to call it that. In 1954, he's going to be condemned by the Senate, which basically means they're going to fire him and tell him to get out of the Senate. He's going to die 3 years later as a broken man of alcoholism. So you can see this meteoric rise and fall with these unsupported accusations of communism. Now, the interesting thing is, much later, historians have now and that this potential list actually does have a little bit more credibility than what was given in 1954. McCarthy just never came out with any hard evidence. Now, brinkmanship. What this is the bringing us to the edge of all-out war. Truman's containment policy has failed with allowing the spread of communism into China and Chairman Mao's government. Brinkmanship is now going to bring us to the edge of all-out war, with John Foster Dulles being the Secretary of State, believing that there is a moral crusade that we need to take against communism. We now have the new hydrogen bomb, which is the force of 1 million tons of TNT. Why would we ever need that kind of force? But the way that we get to brinkmanship is cutting the Army and the Navy and expanding the Air Force and building up of nuclear weapons and using the force of the nuclear weapons to get what we want. Think about us today. It is okay for us to have these nuclear weapons because we're technically the good guys, right? But as soon as another country has one, we start to have major problems with them and want them to remove their nuclear weapons program. Now, NATO and Warsaw Pact, again, a little bit of a review. Both are military alliance. This marks the end of isolationism for the United States for good. This is the first peacetime military alliance that we are in. NATO does start with 10 countries. West Germany, it gets added in 1955 when they're allowed to remilitarize, and this is where these communist countries start to kind of get scared because now the capitalism and democracies come to their back door. So they respond with the Warsaw Pact. And basically what this is going to do is create a buffer zone for the Soviet Union right along that Iron Curtain line that Churchill had talked about. You can kind of see it right here. These pink countries are the Warsaw Pact countries, and this is right along that Iron Curtain line right through here. The only one being outside is Albania. So the space race. The first American satellites fail and fail miserably. Sputnik, Soviet Union's first attempt, or Soviet Union launches Sputnik in 1957, transmitting for 22 days, going around the Earth. What it does is broadcast radio pulses through antennas. We are in complete shock when we see and hear about Sputnik being launched. Now we have the question of, could Soviet missiles hit American cities? What this is going to do is lead us to increased defense spending. We have our first successful launch a year later, 1958. But now the question is going to be, we start to have this race of arms, build up. We have the best weapon, they have the best weapon, we have the best, just back and forth, and spending more and more money on defense. Here is a list of the space race from early 1957 through 1961 and different kind of satellites that get launched. Soviet Union launches Sputnik and then Vostok, and we launched the Explorer in 1958, Vanguard, and then Mercury in 1961. You can see Sputnik launches for 3 months. The Explorer goes all the way through 1967, and then Vanguard for 6 years. And Mercury, Mercury only is in orbit for 15 minutes and 22 seconds. Vostok, you can see, is the first person sent into space with Yuri Gagarin. 1961, about a month later, we send the first American, Alan Shepard, into space. So the spy in the sky, the incident with the spy in the sky. Eisenhower wants open skies, and Khrushchev rejects that at Geneva in 1955. What this is supposed to do is guard against the surprise nuclear attacks. We have IR cameras, which is supposed to track troop movement and missile sites. Eisenhower is supposed to have another arms summit in 1960, right before he's going to leave office. John Foster Dulles persuades Eisenhower to authorize one more spy mission, which is flown by a U-2 spy plane. We have had success up until this last one, of course. It has to be the last one that something happens to. The U-2 is shot down. Eisenhower denies it initially. He later takes responsibility. The summit is called off by Khrushchev. Khrushchev is upset. There's a prisoner exchange 2 years later, and luckily for us, that the pilot does not have to serve the 10 years of hard labor that he was supposed to. Here's a picture of that spy in the sky. So let's recap. You should be able to understand how the movie industry was affected by the fears of communism. Again, the HUAC and the Hollywood 10 being blacklisted describe the impact that espionage had on the development of the Cold War. Alger Hiss, Soviet cables, the Rosenbergs giving nuclear secrets to the Soviets. Analyze the rise and fall of Joseph McCarthy. He has that meteoric rise playing on the fears of communism coming out of the Korean War, and ultimately his downfall with those unsupported accusations over and over again. And lastly, Eisenhower's policy of brinkmanship, cutting the Army and the Navy, building up of the nuclear weapons program, and the Air Force to fire off those missiles. So if you have any questions, let me know. Send me an email. Thank you for watching. We will see you next time. I'm out.